Hello and welcome to The Bookish One. My name is Dan and today we are going to be reviewing John Gwynne's The Shadow of the Gods, Book 1 of the Blood Swan saga. Now, John Gwynne is probably my favourite fantasy author working today. I loved his original series, Faithful and the Fallen, and I've read Book 1 of the sequel trilogy to that, of Blood and Bone. But The Shadow of the Gods is the entry point to a brand new fantasy world by John. Brand new characters, brand new lore, legends and myth. Shadow of the Gods takes place in a place called the Battle Plains of Vigrid, and the action starts about 100 years after a huge battle of the gods. So you had this guy and a bunch of other gods decided to have a bit of a war, and what remains is their bones scattered across the battle plains. So, for example, the snake god, his bones are scattered across the mountains to create I don't know if you can see that, the bone-back mountains there. Got to give some love for the artwork in this book as well. It's absolutely phenomenal. But yeah, and we follow a pretty small cast, actually. We follow three main characters in this book. So we follow Orca, who is probably our main protagonist, I would say, in this book. But John does a really good job of actually balancing these three storylines that he has. Orca is a huntress. She is a brutal warrior, but she's also a mother, and her story revolves around protecting her son from the horrors of this world. You've then got Varg, who is a thrall. Now, a thrall in this world is essentially a descendant of the gods. They have some of the gods' blood in them, and that gives them abilities. And he basically is a slave. He's a slave, and he hunts for redemption and revenge for something that happened in his past. And you've then got Elvar. Now, Elvar is a noblewoman, and she is seeking battle fame from one of the many military companies that you will likely meet in this world. And we follow her journey through the ranks of this military company as they go across the world and perform their various missions as well. One thing I will say is that having read Faithful and the Fallen, it really became clear to me that John loves his Norse and sort of Celtic myth and legend and things like that. But I must admit, this is different gravy. This is very sort of Viking, Norse mythology inspired. Everything's grey and sort of slate grey and dark and black and everything like that. And you can sort of imagine the battle plane covered in grey clouds with rain just slashing down upon black water as the monsters lurk in the shadows. And I think that John does a really great job here of world building, and that is something that John has done numerous times. I think Faithful and the Fallen and from what I've read of Blood and Bone both do that really, really well, but I must say that Shadow of the Gods equally did that very well. One thing that I will say though about Shadow of the Gods that let me down a little bit here was I think that John took a step back when it comes to the characters, and I didn't really feel that connected to them. I think my favourite is probably Orca, and that might be because she's the first character that we're introduced to in this world, and she's sort of our viewpoint through the novel, and I think she's got the most interesting plot, in all honesty. It's really nice to see John tackle a female protagonist for what I think is the first time, actually. He's done really well with some of his other female characters in various other stories. But I think here he really shines and gives a well-rounded female character, which is really nice to see in an epic fantasy setting. The other two characters, though, gotta be honest, John. I mean, Varg, to me, at one point, just I could have cut his entire story from the novel. To be honest with you, he just became such a predictable story, such a predictable character. and that was really quite disappointing. And equally, I mean, I could have read this book and not had Elvar in it. I'll be honest. I could have suffered through Varg, but Elvar's story, I'll be honest, I didn't really know where it was going. To me, it just felt like a bit of a 50% of Varg story and 50% of Orca's story mixed, matched together, and then a few extra sprinkles put on. I like her. I don't care about her plot at all. And I think for me, personally, having the two military companies, having the Bloodsworn, then having a second military company that comes in towards the end of the novel, it did get a bit confusing. And having read Faithful and the Fallen, where there's about 75 different military sort of things going on, I don't think that's me as a reader misunderstanding or misinterpreting something. I think that's having two factions that seem quite similar, because they come from similar places. Whereas, for example, in Faithful and the Fallen, there was sort of the Roman Legion-esque kind of characters and military companies, and then there was a more sort of Celtic sort of sector and a more Roman thing going on, and then just the dark epic fantasy with the main villains as well. And I think here it just became a little bit too... I didn't like it. And that's all I can say as a reader, is I didn't like it. Overall, I feel like the novel to me really suffered a lot from being a bit of a set-up novel, which of course it's book one in a series, and I understand that you've got to do these things, but I've not felt John's other book ones being as much of a setup as this. And I feel like this had a very paper-thin plot to it. And I hope that going into book two, The Hunger of the Gods, that we get a bit more payoff, which I'm sure we will, because it's about double the size of Shadow of the Gods. But I really was feeling like this was really dragging, and it's not a particularly long book at all. I think mine comes to 480 pages. You know, I'm 200 pages into Way of Kings right now by Brandon Sanderson. So I'm pretty much halfway through this book. And by page 200 in this, I was kind of thinking, right, I'm halfway through now. What's going on? What are we doing, guys? Because nothing seemed to really be going anywhere, really. There was a lot of people on ships and a lot of travelling, which, of course, it's epic fantasy. 99% of us end up travelling with our characters from A to B. Unfortunately, here, I don't think it was done particularly well. And I think there were a few occasions for me as a reader where I sort of thought, John wants us to get to point A, but he doesn't know how to really take us there organically. So there were a couple of chapters, more than a couple of chapters actually, where I felt like, we're sort of lagging here, and there were a lot of conversations which felt like they were repeating every couple of chapters, especially in Varg and Elvar's chapters. There was a lot more of Orca, which I liked and which I really appreciated. I'll be honest though, guys, for me, this is probably John's weakest book. I would give it a 3 out of 5, but I would recommend this still, because John has an immense amount of talent, and with each passing book, he's definitely getting better. This, for me, however, is probably his weakest novel. I would say start with Malice. It's a bigger book, and there's a lot more going on, but I think that this does John a bit of a disservice, in my opinion. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed that bit of a ramble. This is my first time doing sort of YouTube stuff, so apologies. I hope that I can get better. I'm currently reading, as I say, The Way of Kings, and then hopefully I'll get to read book 2 of this, The Hunger of the Gods. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you again very soon. Bye for now.